Welcome to episode 2, where I flip PCs up until I make 20k profit. Now after I make it here, the goal is to eventually look for a place to stay. So far we have only made $260 in profit, so we have a long way to go. So this episode started in late February, so let's see if we got any closer to that goal. Starting off with the build that I actually mentioned in the last episode. Now on this last episode, I had a white build with an i7 7700 and a GTX 1060. Now I paid $115 for the bundle, but it definitely had some issues. It was relatively dirty. It had like white flakes throughout the build. While even cleaning it out, I was like contemplating whether I should just bin it and just order a new case. But after looking at the prices of the cases, it really wasn't worth it. So I brought that case right back and then I just gave it a thorough clean and use it for the same build, because otherwise I'll spend way too much for the amount of profit I'm gonna make on it. But other than being dirty, it definitely had some other issues. To start, the motherboard was missing the I/O shield, so that's probably the reason why it got so dirty in the first place, at least from the back side of the motherboard. On top of that, it was also missing the hard drive, so I had to install that really quickly. And I installed a Team Group 512 gigabyte SSD. It was an M.2 and I paid like around $30 or so for it. And on top of that, when I first started to work on the build, I noticed that the cooler would move, which I thought personally that it wasn't attached right or something, but after looking into the mechanics and disassembling it and replacing it, I noticed that it was just the way it was built. Some of these older coolers had some weird designs to it, so it allowed for the cooler literally to like jiggle. Most of the coolers nowadays are fixed on there due to the plaques in the back and everything. Now the build also had a massive pig in the build, and I'll show you guys right now. So those are the issues that build had, but because I needed the I/O shield, I had to wait around 2 weeks or so because I ordered it off AliExpress, and even if I would ordered it from like eBay or something, it would still take like around 2 weeks or so to ship. So while I was waiting, I was just working on another build. The next build I got to work on was actually a white themed build. Now I paid $294 if I'm not mistaken for the build. So let's go over the parts. So for the motherboard, I went with a B450 motherboard that I picked up on eBay for like $53. It does the job and came with all the features that I really needed for the build. And the CPU especially matches pretty well with the motherboard, with it being like a Ryzen 5 3600. It is a great CPU. I believe it's like 6 cores or something, and I picked this CPU up for like $40 on Facebook. For storage, I went with the 1TB SSD from Team Group that I purchased around Black Friday. Now out of all of these parts, I think the best deal that I got was actually for the graphics card, and I'll explain why. Now this is a card that I got completely for free, and it is a GTX 1070. Well, not really free, and I'll explain why. So around, let's say 3 months ago, I had picked up a CPU from a guy locally, and then he had told me that he had other parts he'd been wanting to sell, and so he had shown me this card. And then it was missing a fan, and he gave me a decent price, I would say, but I just wasn't willing to do the work to replace it. So he basically never got around to fixing it or listing it up for sale. So eventually he hit me up. He was like, hey, if you want the card, you could just come and pick it up. And then along with that, he also gave me like a power supply and a kit of RAM. So thank you to that guy. So after I got the graphics card, I just ordered the same way I ordered the motherboard. I also ordered the fans off AliExpress, and I replaced the fans on the graphics card. It performed pretty good. As far as the RAM, I picked up this Time Tech kit from Amazon. These kits go for like around $30 or so. They're nothing too special, nothing over the top, but they get the job done and are really in a pretty good price range in my opinion, and haven't failed me yet until now. So I was testing it out. Everything booted up fine the first time around, but then after, it was kind of like I believe after I tried turning it on again, it like simply wouldn't. And then I tried the simple troubleshooting guides, which is like switching between RAM slots and this and that. And that's when I noticed that one stick of RAM simply wasn't working like at all, no matter what place I put it, and then the other RAM would boot up fine. So that's when I just issued a refund, got a new kit of RAM of the same one, and everything turned out fine from there. Now for the power supply, I actually had an Antec 550 watt. It's a relatively older power supply, but I got it for free, but I can't really remember from where. A lot of people have like these spare parts, so they just give them to me for free, but I'm not completely sure, but I just know I got it for free. I missed a couple items in the recording, and they were the cooler, the cable extensions, and the Wi-Fi card. Now I will include these prices for all these things towards the end in the list. And then finally the case, I went with the Zalman Z1. Now this was actually, I did a YouTube video on this case, and it was like I was going over whether these cases from the Newegg Renewed site were actually good. And it was pretty good, I can't lie, but going back, this case runs like extremely hot. It's actually this one right here. This case just runs extremely hot. It's like, it doesn't really have good airflow, and like my CPU and GPU were all running pretty hot. So what I'm gonna probably end up doing is just install another fan. That being said, we can get into actually building the PC, and so we'll get started with that right here. And so we finished the build, and this is how it came out. While the computer is already pretty much ready, we're still not done setting it up because we still need to install Windows, and that is exactly what I did in this clip. Along with Windows, I also tested Cinebench R23, in which it performed phenomenally, along with Heaven 4.0. Now the issue came when I started monitoring the temperature for the CPU and GPU. Now both of them were running really hot, if I'm being completely honest. And that led me to eventually just taking out the card and trying to repaste it. In which you see me right here, I'm cleaning it out and doing my best to get the card repasted basically. Now unfortunately, after doing all that, the temperatures was still pretty bad, so I had to do a manual undervolt for both the things, and the CPU ran cooler, the GPU not really. So eventually I'm gonna swap out the fan, if I'm being honest. Now with that being said, we actually also tested it out in games. Starting off with Fortnite. Now I tested it on 1080p medium in performance mode and averaged around 120. Next we tested out Marvel Rivals, and in here we actually averaged 51 frames with 1080p on medium settings. And finally we tested out Warzone 2, and with 1080p and a normal preset we averaged around 70 frames per second. Life could be a dream if I could take you up in paradise up above. For the second build, I actually didn't even build the computer from scratch. I actually got a pretty good deal on a pre-built from OfferUp. The pre-built originally had like an i5-8400 along with the GTX 1660 Super and 500 gigabytes of storage, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I paid around $130 for the build. But it did have its little issues to it, just like any other used PC. Now with this one specifically, it actually was missing the side panel completely, and it was just dirty because of that. So the logical thing to do was just to swap out the case at that point, and so that's what I ended up doing. And so I started my search on Amazon and Newegg and all the little sites that have the cases. What I ended up going for was for this Ocunos, I think it's a Cypress 3, and these cases are going for like $60, or they're probably going for like $50 after the discount code. And believe it or not, that was like the best deal at the time, and in my opinion still a pretty bad price. It's just everything now, like all the cases that used to be like $50 are now like $60, so they've gone up by like $10. But I chose this case basically because it matched the black accent of the build. So I wanted to keep it like dark. And on top of that, the case actually had 3 pre-installed fans, so that was pretty amazing. So I ordered that case, and while I was waiting, I had to actually clean out the parts. So I took it to the garage. The cleaning was relatively straightforward, and I disassembled most of the parts so I can get it ready for the case. However, after taking out the motherboard, I noticed there was like some substances on the motherboard, and it was just weird. Like, I don't even know, it was like hot sauce, I don't know, it was just some weird substance. I don't know how it got there. So what I ended up doing was just getting like a toothbrush with like alcohol and scrubbing it through. Same with the CPU cooler, I noticed that it was dirty in general. After 2 days, the case finally came in, and I honestly liked it a lot. It has like these wood accents throughout the case. It is also fairly compact and cute. Regardless, I ended up getting right to work and ended up with this. There's just something about those dark builds, man. They look really nice in my opinion, and even up till now, my personal build has like no RGB on it. I don't really like any distractions or anything, but something about those dark builds, man. I like them. I like them a lot. And here are some of the pictures that I took. I used the same camera I'm recording on, which is a Sony ZV-E10, to take like photos and stuff. And then I actually took these photos, so I'm curious to see what you guys think about the build and the photos, and hopefully spark some comments. Now, after finishing that build, we actually received the IO shield for the first build that I talked about. Now, it matched perfectly, I had no issues with the IO shield, but I just installed it right back into the case. Another thing to point out was that I actually changed the fans on the case. It originally had like black and like blue RGB fans, but they were nasty. Like I said, they were just dirty. So I just decided to remove those fans. Oh, and they were also Molex, so another reason to remove those fans. They weren't PWM or anything like that. While I got the fans installed, there was also one thing that I was definitely missing. A motherboard cable, because I put like these extensions, normally the Asian horse ones, but recently I've been getting the AliExpress PCIe power extensions. And I basically had everything for the graphics card, for the CPU, but I didn't have an extra motherboard one because the kit that I used that was meant for this computer, that the first build that I had in mind, was actually put on the second PC that I worked on. So that left me with no more black extensions. And so we'll have to wait until the next episode or so to really finish the build. But now we actually have to put together the software of the build and test it out fully. So that's what I did. I ended up installing the newest BIOS on there. The interesting part was that after updating BIOS, I couldn't really get it to boot like back to back. So let's say I would boot up right the first time and then it would simply wouldn't turn on. It would like cycle between the CPU light and the RAM light. So I knew there was something wrong. And so I went to the same troubleshooting steps as a Y build, where I switched the RAM from one spot to another. I thought it might have been the RAM. Then again, what are the chances that 2 back-to-back sticks that are RAM kits that I ordered are just faulty like that? Is just probably really unlikely. And then it finally hit me, because this is an older motherboard. These motherboards sometimes don't support like newer RAMs, and they don't have it registered in their program. So that's why a lot of times like the BIOS updates for motherboards say like improve memory compatibility or something like that. And so those little updates help, I guess, register the RAM. And so because TimeTech is like a newer brand and it's not like a well-established one, it probably wasn't registered or working with this type of motherboard in the day. So what I ended up doing, after thinking of that, I tested the original RAM, which was a Corsair one, and it worked just fine. And that wraps up that build, so everything seems to be working. There's no complaints from my end. After finishing each of the builds, I try my best to get them listed as soon as possible if they're ready. And that was the case with the Y build and the wood build that I built. But unfortunately, I didn't get to sell any one of them in this episode. But here's the thing. I actually got a computer in my inventory that has been collecting dust for a while. So do you remember this build from the last episode? Probably not, so let me go over it real quick. So the build had a Ryzen 7 2700X along with a GTX 1070, Now this was a build that I picked up not long before the series started, but probably like a month or so before. And I got the build for like $160, and then I ended up cleaning it out and changing some little parts here and there. But that build I had listed for quite a while. Like it simply would not sell, and I didn't expect it to because it didn't have nothing flashy. Like the lighting, other than the CPU cooler, it was just blacked out pretty much. So it was just collecting dust. And so slowly I brought down the price, probably from this much all the way down to 400. Like probably 2 weeks or so passed by from that price change, and then finally somebody hit me up where they were interested in the build, and they offered me $380 cash. And then I was like, cool, come check it out. And then they tested it out in person. There were some Hispanic people, and they told me they were gonna ship it out to like a family member over there in Cuba. And then I asked them, why don't they like just build a computer from scratch over there? And they said like it's like not really possible. And the way people do it over there to have good systems is that they just have family members from here in the United States ship it over there. Other than that, it would be just hard, or I'm guessing expensive, to just build a computer over there. So they tested out the build and everything came out fine, and they purchased it from me. And so doing the simple math, the $380 sale price from the $160 cost price, that leaves us with $260 in profit. So that leads us to $500 in profit for this episode, and a little bit closer to our goal, you know. We're not even 1/20th of the way there. We're probably like, what is it? 1/240th? I don't know. I can't really think right now. Matter of fact, hold on, let me solve it real quick. So it's half of a 20th, because it's 20K, is 1K. So it'll be half of 1/20th, which is 1/40th. If I'm not mistaken. So we're 1/40th the way there for profit. So I still have a pretty long way to go, but hey, we slowly start building momentum, and we'll kind of scale up as we go along. And hopefully the market kind of gives us more opportunities. So hopefully the prices go down a bit so I can build more, maybe some more deals come along my way. So that's what we'll have to see. And I'm curious to know what you guys think about the market right now. Do you guys flip PCs, or how has it been for you guys after this post-holidays? Let me know in the comments, and I'll hopefully see you in the next episode. Hopefully it won't take this long, or maybe a week or two. Maybe I'll do something between the series. I know Elijah's lab does like PC builds individually, and then he does a series separately. So that might be a goal that I could aim for. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and look forward to seeing you in the next one.